What's good, y'all? It's your boy Havoc, final round. Just saw the explosive knockout from Benn to Chris Algieri, flatlined him. So I'm going to do a little post-fight breakdown and analysis real quick. Not going to be too long-winded. Look, man, impressive performance by Benn. He handled his business. He did what he had to do. Now, I know some people are saying, oh, the competition wasn't that great as Chris Algieri. You know, how would Benn do against some of the top dogs in the division? That is true. You know, I don't necessarily think Benn is ready for, you know, Boots, Virgil, or, you know, obviously the guys above, you know, those ones like Crawford or Spence. I don't think he's ready for that. I think if he is going to take a step up in class, I think he matches up fairly decently against Keith Thurman. Or hell, another tune-up fight with Adrian Broner, another guy who's kind of on his way out, who is on his way out. That would be a nice fight for Benn. Nice little stylistic matchup and experience against the, you know, somewhat of a slick fighter in Adrian Broner. In a fight you can win. That's definitely a fight I think you should take if you're Benn next up. So you can kind of, look, say what you want about Adrian Broner. He's a very talented guy. And I don't know how much he has left in the gas tank, but he's definitely going to give you some good work. You know what I'm saying? Good experience, especially in preparation for some of those bigger fights. Like I said, he handled his business. He knocked this guy out. That's what he was supposed to do, so we have to give him credit for that. You can't take that away from Benn and say what you want. Chris Algieri, he's still a good fighter, man. He's beat Provatnikov. He's went up against Manny Pacquiao, Earl Spence. You know, the guy's been around the block, and he's actually really freaking good considering he hasn't been boxing his whole life. I know he's been involved with combat sports, switching back and forth like kickboxing and shit like that. But still, Chris Algieri, very respectable, and pretty damn good considering he hasn't been doing this his whole life. And then on top of that, he doesn't have much power. You know, that's kind of been the curse of Chris Algieri. He just doesn't have much pop in his punch. I don't really care for power, but Chris Algieri is one of the exceptions. He just does not have enough thump in his punch, man. Not enough to get respect. I mean, don't get me wrong. For some fighters, stylistically, he can get away with his power, with whatever power he has. But when you're going up against the big puncher like the guys he's went up against, it's very difficult to make it through, man. You got to get respect, man. And he's one of the few guys I'm like, man, his power is not... He's not throwing enough heat, man. You know, you hear people say Haney's a pillow-fisted fighter, or, you know, Mayweather was a pillow-fisted. And I laugh at that because those guys, they got some sting in their punches. They have respectable punching power. They can stifle their opponent and get enough respect. They may not knock you out like Julian the Hawk Jackson, but they got respectable power. Chris Algieri, you know, he's one of the few exceptions. I really don't care about power most of the time, especially if you got the boxing skills. But Chris Algieri, man, he's borderline like legitimately pillow-fisted. But still a very skilled boxer. You know, I like Chris Algieri's style, you know, on his toes, boxing on the outside. But once again, unfortunately, that power attribute is just not high enough. And one issue with Chris Algieri, doesn't really move his head a lot. It's kind of hard to when, you know, you got that high peekaboo guard like he has. It was very interesting. I had no idea Chris Algieri was still fighting. I thought the dude retired a long time ago and got into commentating. But apparently he had like 4 fights, and one of them was against Amir Khan. I had no idea he fought Amir Khan. And that fight was funny because Chris Algieri was a pressure fighter, was the aggressor in that fight. He was flat-footed and cutting the ring off, and I understand why he did that stylistically, but it was just weird to see Chris Algieri being a pressure fighter. But obviously in this fight, he was going to be on his toes. He was going to try to stick and move on the outside. The problem with Chris Algieri is that when you're on your toes like that, hopping inside and out, it's hard to control distance. Very hard to control distance. And then when you don't have enough respectable power, you know, you kind of become very easy to time. okay, for your opponent to figure out your rhythm and time. And that's essentially what Conor Benn did. You know, sometimes, you know, Chris Algieri would hop to the inside from outside to inside, and he would get, boom, he would get hit with something. But Conor Benn looked good, man. He did his job. I still think he needs a few fights before he takes a really big one. If he's going to step up in class, I think Keith Thurman would be a good matchup. But, you know, before this fight, I had some concerns in terms of sometimes it seems he loses his identity in the ring stylistically at times. Sometimes he's not consistent enough with his jab, or he forgets to shoot it, and he has a phenomenal jab. He did a good job of throwing it tonight. It was spot on, and his body work was phenomenal tonight. That's essentially what set up the knockout, was his body work tonight. Pretty much broke Algieri down, and you notice Algieri, when the knockout happened, his back was against the ropes. He stopped moving. He got undisciplined, and a lot of that had to do because Conor Benn was breaking Chris Algieri down to the body, and Algieri lost his legs. He got complacent, laid his back to the ropes, and then boom, he got flatlined. And Conor Benn capitalized on that. So phenomenal body work by Conor Benn. Phenomenal jab. He has a piston-like jab. He shoots it upstairs, downstairs. I did have a little concern that maybe he wasn't going to be disciplined and consistent, but he did his thing. The only thing, there's two things that I really want to see moving forward with Conor Benn, and that's more inside fighting. Obviously, Chris Algieri really didn't grant him the opportunity to fight on the inside because he was trying to stay on the outside. But prior fights, I don't know how much of an inside game he has, and that's something he's going to need moving forward if he's going to get to that top-tier division. And another thing is, I don't like in prior fights where he would jump out of range when his opponent would attack him. He did a good job tonight making Algieri pay as he hopped from outside range to inside range. But Conor Benn, I've seen him in other fights where, you know, guys will launch an attack, and he's usually the pressure, aggressive fighter. It seems like that's what he's going to become stylistically, but sometimes I'll see guys jump in on him and he'll pull back out of range, and that's okay to do from time to time, but sometimes you have to capitalize on your opponent jumping in on you like that, use their momentum against them and counter them. You know, that's what a really good counter or a pressure fighter does, a really good aggressive fighter. You know, taking advantage of those opportunities, you know, using your opponent's momentum and timing or rhythm against them. So, but he did his thing. He looked like he matured a lot. He handled his business against a vet. And just want to see him be a little bit more consistent with his countering. Most of his offense comes from looking for openings, okay? Looking for openings rather than taking advantage of openings. When you get to this high level, you have to have the ability to counter, and you have to have the ability to create openings, not just be offensive and poke and prod at your opponent and try to find those. You have to create them, not find them all the time. So he looked good, handled his business. I think he has all the potential in the world, has great punching power. I like to see a little bit more volume. I like to see him press the action a little bit more. I noticed some good head movement tonight, which was a vast improvement from his prior fights. So look, obviously, yeah, we can sit here and say, yeah, it was Chris Algieri. But this is a fight he needed, okay, to build and grow. And he still needs to take a few more tune-up fights, some developmental fights, before he gets in there with the big dogs. But has a lot of potential, and he can be a really great fighter. But I would take my time with this kid. I wouldn't throw him into the fire because it's just not there yet. I still need to see some things. But tell me what you think. Tell me about what you thought about that KO. Who do you think Conor Benn should go up against next? Do you think he's ready for the big dogs? Or should he, take a few more fights to develop? It's your boy Havoc. Final round. Get at me.